Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today, though you may notice we look a little different. Robby, where on earth are you right now?
I'm actually in Aspen, Colorado to speak at the Aspen Ideas Festival. And I'm looking behind this camera, I'm looking out the window of my hotel room at just like the most picturesque forested woodland mountains. It's very beautiful. I'm in a very zen mood, so maybe our banter today will be less combative. We'll see.
So what you're saying is there's an equivalent view that you normally have when you're in the studio with me.
Exactly. So anyway, yes, we have a lot of interesting things to talk about today. We'll discuss Joe Rogan's informal endorsement of Ron DeSantis and look at some polling that shows more and more voters are maybe getting on board with that idea. But first, of course, last night, Liz Cheney continued her tirade against Donald Trump and the entire Trump wing of her party. Let's watch that.
At this moment, we are confronting a domestic threat that we have never faced before. And that is a former president who is attempting to unravel the foundations of our constitutional republic. And he is aided by Republican leaders and elected officials who made themselves willing hostages to this dangerous and irrational man. The reality that we face today as Republicans, as we think about the choice in front of us, we have to choose, because Republicans cannot both be loyal to Donald Trump and loyal to the Constitution.
Yeah, I think that there's not that much to disagree with there. The question is whether or not there are going to be professional consequences for her in the long run, and of course, whether or not it will have any impact on the party. You know, that was Cheney from the Reagan Library in California. And this comes as the January 6th committee has subpoenaed former White House counsel Pat Cipollone, who was a key figure, Cipollone, who was a key figure in Cassidy Hutchinson's viral testimony. According to The Hill, Secret Service says it will respond to the allegations Hutchinson made, accusing Trump of trying to grab the steering wheel of his vehicle and lunging at the Secret Service when informed he would not be able to go to the Capitol on January 6th. Hutchinson's lawyers have stood by their client, saying that she, quote, stands by all of the testimony she provided yesterday under oath to the committee.
However, several outlets have since reported that Bobby Engel, the lead agent for the Secret Service, also the driver of the vehicle, will not corroborate Hutchinson's account. According to NBC's chief White House correspondent, a source close to the Secret Service has said that Engel and the driver are prepared to testify that it never happened. So we don't want to get too hung up on steering wheel gate. Have they mentioned it steering wheel gate yet? I'm sure they will. Everybody's trying to Zapruder tape this. Where was Trump exactly in the car? Was he behind the front passenger seat, or was he all the way back? Because there's like 3 rows of seating in the SUV. It certainly sounds in character for Trump, but now we have people saying it didn't happen. It could be something she heard had happened. You know, the way gossip and rumors start. So she could believe it happened, but it actually didn't. Or she could believe it happened and it did. I don't know. I don't know that it's the most important aspect of this.
Yeah, well, for sure I agree that it's not the most important aspect of this. And there is something frustrating about this story becoming the focus. One, because it's just the most salacious part. People are talking about it, even though it's not, I think, the most meaningful part in terms of what it means about Trump and whether or not he was encouraging the March on the Capitol by armed people with his knowledge. All of those aspects of it, I think, are being under-discussed because of this. But also, she was recounting a secondhand story about what happened in the car. And that is the danger of hearsay, right? That's why it's not admissible in a court of law. I'd be interested to see what the other testimony might be from the driver or anybody else present. But I think, goes to her credibility somewhat, potentially, if this ends up not being true, but also just goes more so to the credibility of whoever recounted these events to her. So again, I don't think it's dispositive and is ultimately a distraction from a lot of the other more substantive aspects of her testimony.
Right. So going back to Liz Cheney for a minute, the interesting thing is she just has she has a lot of credibility, I guess, among kind of mainstream Democrats now because of the stand she's made against Trump. Look, I think the stand against Trump is principled. Props to her for that. No beef there. But she is a figure in the Republican Party who represents, the Bush-Cheney, there's not, I was going to say Bush-Cheney wing, but there isn't even a wing. It's just a kind of memory of a different Republican Party that is not popular among today's Republican Party, because she's known as an avatar, as an advocate for the kind of Bushian, Bush-esque, whatever the right adjective is, a foreign policy that Trump at least rhetorically broke with, and that many of his supporters were eager for even more of a hard, clean break with. So she just doesn't have, it's not like this is a figure who can kind of speak to Trump's base and explain why, look, you might like his policies or you might have liked his presidency, but what he did was very wrong and very bad, and he should be held accountable for that. She's just not the figure that can make that case. I think that's just the reality, because she doesn't have, she's not in the club.
You're making a really good point about, I think, the Democrats' underestimation of the extent to which Trump's shift on foreign policy, the new kind of anti-interventionist thread among parts of the Republican Party, that really was the bedrock for the break from the more traditional conservatives. And I think that if Democrats were more cognizant of that motivation for that break, then they might be able to address it more and offer some of these undecided voters something in the form of the Democratic Party. But Democrats kind of cloaking themselves in the latest conflict, the Ukraine flag in Avatar becoming a symbol of kind of Democratic Party fealty, is not doing the party any favors, to the extent that there is a rising frustration with America's global imperialism, especially when things are so stressed on the home front.
Right. No, absolutely. Well, as for Hutchinson, she's now DC's newest resistance it girl. Here she is as the most popular in news and politics at DC magazine Washingtonian, proving, once again that former Trump staffers can make their way back to the good graces of DC's social circles. You just have to renounce him, I guess, at some point, and then you can be, a celebrity or a resistance hero. And look, I mean, this is being a little cynical. Obviously, she can, maybe she thought it was time to speak up. I've heard enough. I feel compelled to do this. Both things can be true. That it is, good and right to speak up about abuses you witnessed, whether it's Trump, whether it's Biden, whether it's Obama, whoever is in the executive office. If you see bad behavior, we the citizens should want public figures to go public and to talk about it on the record, right? She's not, maybe she's spreading some gossip or things she heard, but she's put herself on the record. Her name is out there, and I think that's a good thing to do. We can acknowledge that while simultaneously recognizing that there's an automatic and immediate path to fame and success for being a Trump heretic. I was a Republican, but I don't recognize the Republican Party, et cetera, et cetera. It might doom your chances in the Republican Party, but there's a ready and willing mainstream media and Democratic political apparatus that will embrace you and celebrate you and mint you as the next hottest thing.
Yeah, I think that's true, Robby. But I also, at least, I watched most of the testimony, and it wasn't clear to me that was her approach. She seemed almost disappointed that the person, the administration that she worked for, that she was proud to work for, ended in this way. And it seemed from her testimony that she was kind of looking around for someone to step in, as were many other members of the administration who were kind of horrified by how far it had really gotten in those last final hours and days, and that it wasn't so much that she was rebuking the Republican Party or saying she was no longer a Republican, but having a narrow criticism of not even just the Trump administration, but Trump himself and his closest acolytes who were encouraging him to go to the Capitol and not make the kinds of statements that some of his other allies and former allies were making at the time, who were recommending that he cool the jets, make a statement that would calm down the crowd, assure people that there was going to be a peaceful transition of power, et cetera, until the last minute when they started making those threats about using the 25th Amendment to remove him from office.
Right. And Trump has made it so that any criticism of him is criticism of the Republican Party on a whole, as a way to stop criticism. That way, if you're going after me, you're going after the entire shebang, which is not fair because Trump himself doesn't follow this rule. Trump feels absolutely justified in, how many times does he attack Mitch McConnell like per day? Mitch McConnell, like the most important behind the scenes figure for laundering his agenda into legitimacy, for getting his justices confirmed and judges, and for to the extent his agenda was successful at all. It's all Mitch McConnell doing it. Mitch McConnell can't say a single bad thing about Trump, but Trump can bash him and whoever else he wants, 800 times a day, and his supporters just accept that, yeah, well, that's who he is. It's fine when he does it, but not fine when anybody else does it. I never quite understood that, but
I think they all learn their lesson about what happens when you go up against Trump and don't issue that final ending shot during the Republican primary in 2016, and most people aren't willing to cross that Rubicon again. Although I will say, we were talking about this a little bit after the show yesterday. Tucker Carlson is probably the only one of the few at very least, who could land a real blow to Donald Trump and his reputation. And if I were Donald Trump, I'd be on the phone with him immediately after the hearing, begging him to give me a sympathetic gloss. So we'll see how he continues to cover that going forward. And we will tell you what's on our radars next.